Good morning. What's this then? So basically, yeah, I live in a house, my actual home, where if I want to go like pee, I lift the toilet seat up, right? Problem is, the toilet seat actually isn't able to stand up because the positioning of the toilet seat, it always comes down. Now, because I live with all females, they didn't know that this was an issue. They don't see this as an issue. It's not an issue for them because they always sit down, right? You know, literally, that you can see the heavy female presence in this house. And this means for me, I have to either like pee in the hole, or I have to hold one hand up and pee like this. I'm 22 years old, so I can do this, right? But I just don't want to, you know what I mean? Like, I prefer if the seat was able to stay up without assistance, you know? But it's not really an issue for anyone else in the house, so apparently I just have to deal with it. You know what I mean? It's just,
So yeah, I was doing some like actual thought again, and you know about how do we solve problems in society, how do we approach them, what things do we need to be mindful of, and it occurred to me the that what could be one of the biggest issues is our inability to truly see from the perspective of those who suffer the most. You know, this is obviously easy, especially since it's election season. We're going to go for this. Um, the fact that many of people in government have to deal with issues that affect people that are almost strongly restricted from entering government for multiple reasons. Is it systematic, some form of systematic discrimination, or things like the poverty gap, for example. The sheer fact of like the Eton or Etonian person is more likely to be in some form of ruling class, like the government, or numerous issues, like for example, career advancement is harder, for certain circumstances. The most obvious one being, having children, which partially explains the discrepancy between male and female persons, especially as they get older, in higher positions of office, so legislative office, you know. So, of course, the biggest issue here is always the fact that those in power can't really relate to those who often aren't, and often are too bogged down by their situations in order to really even take time out to write a letter to their MP. So, it's is it the biggest challenge when we want to, achieve some form of equality in society, or maybe the biggest stumbling block? At least it's not the biggest challenge, I'd say, but major stumbling block, because without that perspective, you know, it's a struggle to even make anything right or make anything that actually works productively. For example, if you do something like a help to buy scheme for potential homeowners, but forget the fact that they have a certain income of, say, I don't know, 30k a year, but a deposit is like 25k or 30k a year. That's a yearly deposit. Even that, I'm missing that perspective of what is available to someone on 30k a year compared to the salary that might be needed to live in somewhere like where I live in London, which is probably 40k plus if you're not renting from like council housing, for example. But yeah, I think that's really important to bring up, because especially where certain groups of persons make claims about their situations, it's important to listen to them and actually examine the claim rather than leading to the easy answer of just avoiding the issue or dodging the issue, or not even dodging it, like replacing it with another issue, or saying, "Oh, other people suffer too." It's like, it's a classic, Black Lives Matter or men suffer too, where there are other issues for certain demographics, but the problem arises when you bring up an issue for a certain demographic and someone is prone to switch to a different problem or try and generalize the problem, as if the housing market issue and the rise of housing prices affects, say, poor and rich people equally, or if, homeowners do suffer, for example, but then potential first buyers suffer in a different way. And then obviously historically, non-white potential homeowners suffer furthermore, for example. So this is separate issues, in the same way that, one, say, unchecked law enforcement system can cause different people to suffer, depending on how other problems in society combine with this lack of protection from corruption. Black Lives Matter is the easy one. For example, you have the combination of the problem of police brutality that affects everyone, and then the problem of quite inherent racism in American society that obviously affects predominantly black people. So when you combine these issues, then you get this higher amount of black persons being killed, for example. But yeah, perspective is perhaps the most valuable thing, and having to advance one's perspective by really trying to get outside your bubble. It goes back to the same thing a lot of people are really starting to clock onto now. The concept of remembering not to remain in your bubble and within your echo chamber for the rest of your life, even though it's a lot easier than it ever was, because you have the internet. You can find people, who share your values or your political views, or into the same video games that you are, and just kind of just stick around in this box. And it's easier to just do that, I guess, because it's comforting. Like people that you're into. I mean, if I find people that are into 90s alternative rock, it's easier to relate to. It's like, oh, we shared similar childhoods. Oh, you had a Nirvana phase too. Oh, cool. But I don't think that should stop me from exploring those people who listen to Rush, or listen to Handel growing up, for example. There's always something different, even if I'm not necessarily into it. Although I can actually listen to Handel, but maybe that's one of the biggest stumbling blocks to progress. The fact that we seem unwilling or potentially unable to truly see ourselves as part of a species, and also really go for that empathy. Because it's very easy to just dismiss other people's issues, because you have your own issues. Everyone has their own issues. It's, life normally isn't too easy. But I think if we can come from that angle of understanding and truly going with the approach of understanding issues, especially for those who are in positions of legislation, then we can actually find progress. Will be quite easy, I think that's why we have people who are specialized. What was I watching? Is it Red Pill? The thing about men's issues and feminism and extremism and whatnot in terms of gender-based activism. And the thing that kept coming up is this concept, or it seemed like the sentiment that feminists are necessarily opposed to people that campaign for men's rights, when they both seem to point to the root issue of what happens when we overly subscribe to gender roles and kind of enforce them on each other, and how that's perpetuated for centuries, and the issues are coming out now. So the concept of the male having to carry the whole family, child support, whatnot, and the concept of the female being the necessary primary caregiver, and all the problems that causes. The easy one is family court and custody cases that seem to be biased towards females, for example, and employment opportunities that seem to be more catering towards men. And maybe it's part of the whole narrative of how people see demographics as so necessarily different and they must be opposed. Men are from Venus, women are from Mars, but I think one does tend to get lost in not only their own issues, but get lost in the hysteria that is often surrounds things that can be a bit difficult, can be a bit controversial, like discussing, things like, have we truly achieved equality, even in the legal sense, in terms of protecting people from exploitation? Even have we even achieved that legally, let alone socially and actual in fact, but I don't know if that comes as a result of one that goes through so much adversity in their life, a man who goes through so much adversity, or I don't know, it's another demographic, a Muslim, easy one, for example, especially in the UK and Western Europe, Western world, to get so lost that they're unable to even have the spare time, the spare space in their heart to approach empathy for others, of course. And the question is if this is possible and if we can revert back to this. Is that a pun about Islam? I don't know. If you can revert back to this attitude, if we ever had this attitude, did we ever have this attitude? Maybe, who knows? Question of how much that could spell on progress if we come from that angle. So generally, I think in order to approach any true end goals of equality, we need to seek to understand more, firstly, but secondly, remember the approach of solving the problem as opposed to winning the argument and just putting your case forward. The key thing is to see roots to solve the problem. It may not be the case that your route to solving a problem or your perspective is enough, and it normally isn't. You never know. You might be in the right this time, but normally most people aren't totally right or have totally really considered everything and every angle to then go on and deliberate whether how we can solve an issue. Whether it be police brutality and accountability, or how do we deal with criminals, or how can we facilitate things like being a single parent, so that regardless of whether or not you're a male or female single parent, your disadvantage is first equal amongst each other, and hopefully, if it's possible, the disadvantage you have is compensated for somehow in the public sphere. An easy example is things like free childcare, or 30 hours or something for childcare, for example. So that's an easy example of where, say you were, I don't know, raised in a family that was quite rich, so you just knew childcare, that was given because you have money and you have time and space in your house. Your dad or mum can just hire a nanny, and it's not too difficult. A good quality nanny too, who can help supplement your education if you want. Or you can go to a private boarding school and do all that fancy shit, where that isn't normally available for other people, but it's often difficult to see outside your own circle in that way. It's a classic thing. If you just work hard, then you just achieve everything. But that forgets all the nuance of all these little issues that come about and how these things perpetuate. Because if you have, a child born to, say, I don't know, a drug dealer, yeah, but not a necessarily bad parent, there's still obviously little issues. If he's a single parent, of course it's a he. Have you seen a female drug dealer? I have. And yeah, that's often where we seem to get lost. We're too quick to cast judgment based on projecting who we are in the world. It's like me saying some of my peers at this age are too young for children because I'm too young for children, but they obviously have different lives, have different support networks than I do, for example. So I can't even cast a full judgment. All I can say is try to understand their situation and see where they're going with it, so I can actually get a real proper full-on perspective rather than this weird one where I just kind of fill in the gaps. But yeah, gaps, gaps. There's lots of gaps in the market for common sense politics, but we'll go on to that in a later video, I guess. Hopefully you remember to vote, I guess. What else is there to talk about? I'll say it now. MEA finals will be a sweep. What else do I need to predict while we're here? Like since I'm gonna use my mutilated perspective, because of the chemistry between the Arsenal team, they're gonna challenge for the league next season. I could go on. I could go on. I could go on. I don't know. There's not much more to say. I'm really waffling right now. But yeah, seek to understand, and we can reprimand the issues at hand. Bars.